The series of dangerous fires in Poland continues. It started yesterday with the Mariwilska 44 shopping mall and several other places in Warsaw. Today, a fire broke out at a high school in Grodziec Mazowiecki. There was also an explosion which injured 9 people at a firefighting school in Poznan. Is this still a tragic coincidence, or is it time to ask the question, is Poland the target of a hybrid attack by foreign forces? If the fire had occurred literally a moment earlier, a truly enormous tragedy could have occurred. Students took their high school exams here today. We just happened to have extended English, and 5 minutes after we finished English, the school caught fire. Cadets of the National Fire Service School in Poznan were less fortunate. 9 people were injured in an explosion that occurred during class. The Public Prosecutor's Office has just opened an investigation into the massive fire which broke out on Saturday night in a shopping mall at 44 Mariwilska Street in Warsaw. The activities conducted in these proceedings are aimed primarily at establishing the cause of this fire, as well as determining the extent of the damage and establishing the circle of victims. Among them are the owners of the Mariwilska 44 company, but also the tenants of the premises, and there were almost 1,500 of those. Their families were left with nothing. I have 2 children, a rental apartment and a loan, and now I don't know how to pay for it. Questions arise. How is it possible that the entire hall was ablaze just 11 minutes after the fire broke out? Was it an unfortunate accident, or rather arson? And finally, who is responsible for the fire at the mall on Mariwilska Street? Evidence is being gathered in these proceedings. Witnesses are being interviewed and documentation is being collected. Also on fire over the weekend were a landfill of bulky items in Velanov, garbage and building materials in Sikierki, a car park in Powinska, and a high-rise building in Zhibowska Street. A fire also broke out in the Campinos National Park. In Bytom, 10 buses of a private carrier were burned. When it comes to security, we're eminently concerned at the moment. We're seeing a series of different kinds of crisis events in Poland, events that are very serious, events in which we can suspect they had an origin that was not necessarily natural. At the same time, the Western press writes that special groups of Russian saboteurs have arrived in countries supporting Ukraine. We are dealing with something that is part of a broader diversionary liquidation operation. Let me remind you that already before, diversionary groups were operating on the territory of most European Union countries. A scenario in which Poland is the target of a hybrid attack is also not ruled out by the new Civic Coalition government. For now, however, there is no official reaction. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask the question of the Prime Minister, where, in all his political hate, are the politicians responsible for managing the crisis situation? The series of fires in Poland happened just at the time of the replacement of ministers in Donald Tusk's government. Some of them want to continue their political careers in Brussels. Among others, Marcin Kierwiński, the former Interior and Administration Minister, left office at such a critical moment. Also, among other things, the minister is responsible for overseeing the border guard, overseeing those services that are directly responsible for the border. In the morning, just before the new ministers were sworn in, Polish President Andrzej Duda spoke to Prime Minister Donald Tusk for an hour. The meeting was not previously scheduled. The conversation took place face-to-face. It probably concerned Poland's security. Konrad Wąż, TV Republika. On Sunday, as explosions blasted in the air, Ukrainian police officers evacuated local residents from Vovchansk in the Kharkiv region. We thought we will get by somehow, that the armed forces of Ukraine will hold back this onslaught. Why did you decide to leave now? Are you scared? Scared? Scared, of course. One man passed by and said the Russians are already in Hatchisha, less than 3 kilometers from here. Fighting takes place 500 meters away from my house. The Vovcha River is 500 meters away from my house. Russians are on the other side. Ukrainian tanks roll in, shoot, and roll out. On the other side, there is shouting all the time. You could hear people getting captured, maybe. I don't know. Some military orders are being shouted out. Shooting all the time. Shells are constantly flying, day and night. One man was brought into an evacuation point with torn-off fingers, said Ukrainian paramedics. We helped the civilian. He was brought in from Vovchansk. He was getting out of his house, tried to close the doors, and a Russian soldier fired at the door and the man got his hand shot. Fingers were amputated. Vovchansk is now under full Ukrainian control, according to Tamás Gambarashvili, head of the Vovchansk military administration. Russian forces launched an armed ground attack on Friday near Ukraine's second city of Kharkiv in the northeast of the country, and made small inroads, opening a new front in a war that has long been waged in the east and the south. Ukraine sent reinforcements as fighting raged in the border areas of the region. the defense ministry said, adding that Russia had pounded the frontier town of Vovchansk with guided aerial bombs and artillery. Ukraine chased Russian troops out of most of the Kharkiv region in 2022, following Russia's full-scale invasion in February of that year. But after weathering a Ukrainian counter-offensive last year, Russian forces are back on the offensive themselves and slowly advancing in the Donetsk region that lies further to the south. Farmers from the Orka Agricultural Union, who are protesting in the Polish parliament, will hold a hunger strike until the Prime Minister agrees to meet them. We will only take water, we will not take any meals until we meet the head of the government, Donald Tusk. Until now, all unions or organisations have delivered their demands to him through intermediaries. Yet for 6 months we have not seen any results, so we would like to know Donald Tusk's position.
Chcielibyśmy poznać stanowisko pana Donalda Tuska.
Strikers in the parliament are not satisfied with who in Donald Tusk's government has been appointed to represent the interests of Polish farmers. We believe that Mr. Donald Tusk has surrounded himself with people who are not very capable of representing us. Mr. Michał Kołodziejczak has been attacking us and slandering us in television interviews, to which we have accessed and have seen. We believe that just any person off the street would be better to represent the interests of the farmer. The minister shouts a lot, but his effectiveness is practically non-existent. Farmers are protesting against the import of grain and other agricultural products from Ukraine. At issue is the European Commission's earlier decision to lift a ban on grain imports to frontline countries. Grain from Ukraine is not subject to EU restrictions, which makes it cheaper and more readily available to producers. The Polish farmer is losing out. These are the two biggest problems, namely the uncontrolled influx of goods from Ukraine and other countries as well, because it's not only from Ukraine that these goods enter and spoil our market. And the Green Deal. We believe that all the points that concern agriculture and are unfavourable to us must be removed. The rest of the Green Deal we don't want to overturn. On the other hand, a march with the slogan "Down with the Green Deal" passed through the streets of Warsaw on Friday. It was organised by Solidarity. Farmers and other labour groups also joined the protest because, as they explained, the Green Deal will hit us all. This is not a green but a red order that will do away with us Poles. The Prime Minister doesn't want to meet us. That's why we're here, so that he can hear our voice and finally make some kind of decision. Because we want dialogue. We want to talk, but unfortunately for this period we have not been given this chance. If there is no farmer, there will be no food. There will be nothing. They even coined it in Brussels. They called it the Green Deal, but it has nothing to do with law and order. During the protest, 150,000 signatures were collected for a civic proposal for a referendum on Poland's adoption of the Green Deal. The head of Solidarity, Piotr Duda, handed the request to Speaker of the Sejm, Szymon Hołownia. Formal verification of the letter is now underway. If all the conditions are met, the Sejm will deal with it. A decision of the National Fund for Environmental Protection and Water Management means that manufacturers and importers of heat pumps will have more time to provide certificates until the end of this year instead of mid-June, as previously. In addition, the list of ZUMs, that is, green devices and materials allowed under the Clean Air Programme, has been expanded to include the so-called European quality marks issued by private companies, Keymark, EHPAQ and Eurovent. The 3 European quality marks, which will be honoured on the ZUM list by the end of this year, provide a guarantee that the devices meet the relevant efficiency parameters, and the user is thus assured that they are safe and proven products, not energy vampires. The National Fund for Environmental Protection and Water Management extended this deadline and added the possibility that these certificates for heat pumps could be issued by, let's face it, insecure, not to use the word shenanigans. Representatives of the Polish industry of heat pump manufacturers and importers are sounding the alarm that this could end in tragedy for the Polish market and the people who will benefit from the offer of the government programme. They wrote an open letter to Climate and Environment Minister Paulina Hennig-Kloska on the issue. Allowing the registration of devices on the ZUM list for clean air, the so-called Keymark, EHPAQ and Eurovent quality marks will once again flood the Polish market with heat pumps of dubious quality and expose the Polish consumer, unaware of the whole situation, to the purchase of devices with inflated parameters. The Polish heat pump industry has alerted the National Fund to cases in which the equipment, despite having the certificates authorised on Friday, does not meet the declared parameters. These certification companies, one of them is a German company about which Polish heat pump manufacturers too raise doubts about the quality of the certificates they issue. On top of that, according to the opposition, the whole affair resembles a story related to the so-called windmill law, where inexplicably the regulations changed in favour of one of the wind turbine manufacturers. Lobbying is not in the actions of the government, but in the hands of lobbyists. And the government is either a victim of this, or a tool if it is weak, or someone simply committed to something at the expense of Poles. Because at the end of the day, less competition, fewer entities that can install a heat pump for us simply means higher prices, higher margins. When you don't know what's at stake, it's all about money. If it is true what the media, MPs point out, that there is a prolongation of these certified heat pumps, then it is all about making money for the heat pumps made in Germany and certain entrepreneurs. Maybe a share someone bought for themselves. According to commentators, the global heat pump market is an arena for lobbyists with almost unlimited resources. Lobbying extends not only to Poland, but especially to Chinese companies, which are the giant in this market, and German companies, which are involved in the certification of this type of equipment. The problem is that many of these pumps do not meet the conditions they should meet. The Minister of Climate and Environment, Paulina Hennig-Kloska, announced over the weekend that on Monday she would clarify the issue of ambiguities with the new heat pump certification regulations. Today we learned that a conference on the issue is not expected to be held until Wednesday. Perhaps the problem is bigger than the Climate Ministry assumed.